Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day and a wonderful week. Welcome to another episode of We Aren't Dead Yet. I'm Emily Armstrong, creator of the TTRPG system Quests and Quarrels, as well as the settings Beckett Build, Culinary Punk, and Elder Space. I'm here with Dazzlecat.
Hello, I am Dazzlecat. I am the creator of the TTRPG Meaty Bones, as well as the worlds of Pangorio and Hypnosium. I am here with Sapphire.
Hi there, my name is Safa Burnell. I'm a best-selling cyberpunk and mythpunk author and an editor for a small press. I've been in the fiction sphere for more than 15 years, and I'm going to remind everybody today, don't worry, there's always something we can do, because we aren't dead yet. What an explosive state of affairs. Godzilla is an Oscar winner! The year when Oppenheimer swept through 7 wins, both Japanese-made Godzilla -1 and Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron celebrate Oscar wins. Holy crow! When is the last time we ever thought that a Godzilla movie would end up as an Oscar winner?
Well, it was fantastic. I'm glad that it won something. I was worried that it wouldn't get any nods.
Yeah, I was worried too because it was one of the stand-up movies of the year. And I mean, this year, we were talking about this in a previous episode, this year was such a stellar year for some really well-made, artfully done movies. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be, you know, the blockbusters and stuff, although we did have Barbenheimer. But we had such, you know, Zone of Interest, Maestro, you had The Holdovers, you've got Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of a Fall. And you've got all of these movies that were just intensely well-constructed films. And Oppenheimer did incredibly well, as we knew it would.
Oppenheimer slept.
Oh, best picture, best director, best actor in a leading role, best actor in a supporting role. Incredible. Oh, best cinematography. Also best original score by Ludwig Göransson. We even have Wes Anderson in there with The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar for live-action short film. The War is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko by Dave Mullins and Brad Booker. You've got just incredible amounts of stuff that did really well. I think the one thing that I was like, huh? I mean, okay, Poor Things, you know, okay, well-constructed, but costume design did not go to Barbie. What? That's like the one thing I thought they would just smash.
I was so surprised about that. And don't get me wrong, I haven't seen Poor Things. I'm sure it's great. I was just very, very surprised that Barbie didn't take it. I didn't think it was a competition between the two.
I really didn't. You know, I was like, okay, yeah, no, clearly Barbie's going to take that one. I mean, Napoleon, fantastic costumes. Fantastic period costumes as well. The military uniforms looked amazing. Oppenheimer, again, great period costumes. You know, solid. Poor Things, okay, you know, interesting. Barbie.
I really thought it was going to be between Napoleon and Barbie.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm also incredibly disappointed that I'm Just Ken from Barbie did not win original song. I mean, what was I made for? Sure, Barbie won the nod on that with Billie Eilish's song, but I'm Just Ken. Come on. I love that song. I love it. I play it in the car every once in a while. I love I'm Just Ken.
Yeah, What Was I Made For is a beautiful song, but I'm Just Ken was so much fun. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to win. I knew that What Was I Made For was kind of I don't want to say the Oscar bait, because it wasn't. It was just a really great song that was written for a great movie, but it was kind of obvious that I was going to win, but I still wanted I'm Just Ken. Also surprised, I thought production design, which actually also went to Poor Things. Sorry, I promise we're not ragging on Poor Things. It just happens to be the one that won the other categories that I'm surprised about. I really thought production design was going to be another one that was like a Barbie Napoleon toss-up or like a Barbie Oppenheimer toss-up.
Yeah. Like Killers of the Flower Moon too, you know, did some considerably good production design, you know, but when you think of the event of cinema, I would have thought that something like Barbie, like the optics of Barbie, just the visuals that it had, was something stellar that we haven't seen in so long. It was just decently fun. But I'm surprised that Poor Things got that months ago before Barbie even came out. So this last year. Time passes. Okay, this just in, time passes. But I remember Architectural Digest did a video about Barbie with Margot Robbie on the set. And that was an actual physical set.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They built it. They built it in a gigantic soundstage. Now, obviously, not everything is going to be, a pure set when you've got, Barbie and Ken in the car and the whole thing going on like that. But the actual house and that kind of cul-de-sac of Barbie Magic Dream houses and things like that was there. We toured it. So it's a shame that didn't get it because the production design was really something special. At least I thought it was. I mean, film editing with Oppenheimer, I absolutely agree with that. I totally agree that the editing for Oppenheimer was just on point. Visual effects, though. Visual effects. Godzilla -1. Come on here. It went up against Napoleon, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and The Creator. Godzilla -1 takes it. I am so glad it did. They had a very tight budget on Godzilla -1. They used a lot of practical effects on Godzilla -1, and I think that really did the film a lot of good because people don't seem to be as wowed by the intricacies of CGI visuals anymore.
Thankfully.
Yeah. If you just put in a bunch of CGI, that's no longer as impressive as it was 15 years ago. People aren't going to be like, oh, wow, you have to see it. And you have to see it on this big giant screen because like the CGI is incredible and you got to see all of the effects. Now it's coming kind of back to this renaissance of, dude, this was a practical effect. Whoa. Holy crap. Are you serious? That was a practical effect. Oh my gosh. It looks so good. It looks so real. It looks so this. It looks so that. I'm so proud of seeing that as somebody who's been in the film industry because I love practical effects.
If something uses a practical effect, I'm immediately enthralled because I know how much effort it takes to get good practical effects. And to make them fit with CGI effects properly is very, very difficult. I'm so glad that we're returning to more practical effects.
International feature film, I wish Godzilla -1 had been on that list. I'm surprised it wasn't. Original song, again, What Was I Made For? Cinematography, Oppenheimer. Original screenplay, Anatomy of a Fall. Won it instead of The Holdovers, Maestro, May December, or Past Lives. Okay, Anatomy of a Fall was good. Oh, The Holdovers was excellent, though. So I was like, Actress in a supporting role, Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers.
I was so happy with that. I really like The Holdovers. We watched it over winter break, and it was a really, really fantastic movie. I know that there is a bit of controversy going on with it right now because there is somebody alleging that the script was essentially stolen almost word for word.
Oh, I haven't heard this.
The writer of Luca, I believe his name is Simon Stevenson. The movie that Stevenson wrote is called Frisco, and the synopsis is a 40-something pediatric allergist who specializes in the hazelnut and is facing a divorce, learns lessons in living from a wise beyond her years, terminally ill 15-year-old patient when she crashes his weekend trip to a conference in San Francisco. I can see the similarities because The Holdovers is about a teacher who stays during, I believe it's winter break, and is learning from one of the I believe also like 15-year-old students who stays during the break. And he's also going through a divorce, and there are a lot of similarities. I have not read the Frisco script, but I have seen comments from people who have read the Frisco script, and they do say that there are striking similarities. From the Variety article, there was an email exchange reviewed by Variety, a call between I believe it is Stevenson and Variety took place. And in a follow-up, Stevenson wrote, this is the author of Frisco, the evidence the Holdovers screenplay has been plagiarized line by line from Frisco is genuinely overwhelming. Anybody who looks at even the briefest sample pretty much invariably uses the word brazen. So I'm interested to see what happens. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other because, like I said, I haven't read Frisco, so I can't really form an opinion just based on what others have said. But it's concerning. It's concerning that something like this could potentially happen. There is proof that the writer of The Holdovers not only read the script for Frisco, but like commented on it being a good script, but said that they weren't interested in directing it. And that was a couple of years before the holdovers. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's tricky. And this is something that does happen in the industry. There are a lot of scripts, and a lot of people are using various forms of things like Save the Cat or other kind of story doctor. You have this scene, and then you have that scene, and then you have that, and then you have that as a climax, and there you go. Like patterns of script writing, that kind of thing does happen. And there have been times where, you go with an original script and you end up at a convention, or you end up at, a pitch session and things like that. And then all of a sudden you see something freakily similar to the thing that you pitched being out there. Now, part of it can be that just, we have a creative subconscious. There's definitely things that connect people together. And, if you have a story about a similar thing, then it's going to come out potentially in a similar way. There are other times where it's apparently more nefarious. And things have been kind of like, oh man, that was really good. I can't get that story out of my head. Well, I better write my version of it, which is one of the reasons why when I was working as a script doctor and when I was working in the industry, I switched to writing novels. Because as a novelist, I have more creative control over my content than I would as a screenwriter. And that is something that kind of needs to be looked at in a sincere and serious way, because it does happen. Absolutely, things like that happen in the industry. If you don't think they happen, then you need to take the rose off your glasses, take a look at what the industry actually is. I mean, sometimes you're like, yeah, well, how many different ways can you tell a buddy movie? Ask that to the cast of The Eagle. You can tell a buddy movie in incredible amounts of ways, but it's still a buddy film. It's still about two disparate figures coming together and learning how to coexist. Same thing with romance. There are expectations within romance and rom-coms that this happens and then that happens, and then there's a third wheel, and then something is going to separate them. And then before they can be truly separated, there is that meet you at the airport moment where it's like, please stay, marry me, blah, 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 do this, do that. So there are certain things that just are patterns of filmmaking. I mean, it's unfortunate to see what is potentially going on with the holdovers. To the person who is the wronged party, I wish you the best. To the person who is the party that wronged the other one, I wish you the karma that you deserve.
I'm looking at the introductory document that Stevenson put out. I am glancing at the structure side by side of Frisco versus the holdovers, and I think that this is going to be an interesting battle because this is very revealing. I'll say that.
There's one thing to having similarities within certain scripts, and there's another thing to have, say, archetypal characters, like the minor characters that we know and love, which bring us to the nature of the episode today, which we're talking about minor characters and NPCs.
Okay, I do have one question involving this. Books like Wheel of Time, the series, you have Rand and the friends where they start out as they're like a D&D party. There's 4 of them. And so they do things with the main plot as a group, and they take turns being the main POV character, and then they start diversifying, and then they add more. How would you define a group of characters like that? Because I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the fantasy that I read has these groups like this. It's a huge thing.
When we're talking about groups of characters in literature, you have to think of how much kind of quote unquote screen time are they getting, and are they meant to function as individuals or as a unit? If they're meant to function as a unit, they're sort of almost a conglomerate character. There still has to be that POV character. There still has to be that person that we're supposed to connect to, that we're supposed to see over the shoulder of. The fiction that I've been seeing lately, as in the last 10 years or so, has gotten so tough on having multiple point of views in a single chapter or even a single book. And I think that really is a layover from the rise of young adult fiction and young adult fantasy and sci-fi, where you have these girl bossy ingenues going around in first person, writing about their experiences from their side of the story. And we're seeing that in other things too, to the point where we're losing the ability to see anybody else's mind in a single chapter, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think you can have multiple point of views in the same chapter. I don't think it's that confusing if you're not writing for 13-year-olds. I think that if you're writing for an adult market, it can be done and it can be done well, but I think it gets really complicated really quickly. When you have an ensemble cast, like I do in Neon Lieben, Neon Lieben is a huge, actually quite huge ensemble cast. And looking back at it, it's almost one of those things I'm like, oh, if I redid Neon Lieben, if you redid Neon Lieben, if you took it off, then you re-edited it and the whole thing, what would you do? Well, I'd get rid of some of the characters. I would absolutely trim down some of those characters because eventually they just become names T-posing until they're useful objects. And I think that's some of the thing with ensemble casts, which becomes difficult. It happens a lot in fantasy, and it happened a lot in fantasy like 30, 40 years ago too, because people were coming off of D&D, they were coming off of Lord of the Rings, they were coming off of these things where you'd have these ensembles. Well, you need this archetype and that archetype, and you need the thief archetype, and you need the magician, and you need all these things together to kind of make a complete group, which has its place in literature. It really does. And it can be a lot of fun because the plus side of that is you get enough different kinds of characters that a reader can usually find one they resonate with. That's great. But it can clutter up a manuscript so fast. You end up not really getting to know any of them unless you're reading the entire series. And to be honest, a lot of people do love series for that reason, because they're able to kind of learn more about their favorite minor characters as they go forward, because maybe, the minor character of this novel is the main character of another one. When we're approaching things one book at a time, it creates a situation where you can really muddy the water, because you do need clarity. You have just a couple of characters that you can highlight when you're writing a novel that's, say, generously in the fantasy realm, because fantasy novels tend to be bigger. So you might have people with the attention span to fall in love with 2 or 3 characters, maybe 5 if you stretch. That includes the villains, that includes the antagonists, the main characters, maybe, a subplot character or 2, a romance figure, something like that. You don't have people with the mindset of being able to juggle 12 characters anymore. It is a thing of the past. The issue with ensembles is eventually some of the ensemble gets lost. And then you have to start questioning, what's their purpose here? Is their purpose to round out some form of D&D-like adventure group where you have, the fighter, the rogue, the mage, the wizard, the healer, cleric, whatever, you need the complete set in order to feel like, you have your flank covered. Is that the purpose of the book? In that case, then this better be a fairly long character-driven work. But I lost my train of thought. It disappeared from the station. Let me take a sip of some form of beverage. I was. So when you have, this entire party full of people, some of them are not going, hold on, let me say it this way. So when you look at something like Vox Machina, we have the time in that series to get to know several of those characters, but we don't get to know them all at once. One season is more focused on Percy. Another season is more focused on some of the other characters. You get this flow, but you have enough time character-wise to get to know them. When it comes to the villains, when it comes to the, people that are antagonizing them, other than in the Percy situation where you have the vampire and his wife, you really don't get to know many people outside of that. You barely get to talk to, the seller guy, the salesman, the sexy sailors, Gilmore. Yeah, you barely get to talk to Gilmore, which is great, but it's about the relationship between these characters. Anything else is superfluous to the plot. Everything has to go back to the idea of plotting character. And so we can do the ensemble there because it's such a fairly intimate thing where outside stuff is just for context, but really the main course of the show, I would say, in my opinion, is the relationship between the characters. And so that is one type of literature. Okay. And what the danger is when you're writing novels or you're writing screenplays or, audio dramas, like we're approaching with Waxwing right now, as we're going through edits and different materials on that, is bloat happens so quickly. I am the kind of writer that, we need a garbage can. Let me make the garbage can into a character for 5 minutes. I love seeing ensemble characters because, this world is a rich place and everybody has a story to tell. But each novel is a lens on just a couple of people. Each short story is even smaller. It's even tighter. It is the lens of like maybe 2-3 people. That's it. What it does is it can confuse the reader because the reader thinks when they're introduced to somebody, this person must be important. I probably need to know who this person is. Well, once we get past 5 characters, if they're in quick succession, good fucking luck. And yes, we can have people that are in the, kind of flyby characters that are in different novels. You kind of need that. You walk into a store and you talk to somebody, but you don't need to know that the person, the cashier ringing up the purchase is Sheila from, Chumley. The important thing is that the main character, Stan, he goes in there, buys another shirt because his got all oily and gross in time to throw it on in the car so that he can go to his business meeting. There's ghosts passing by. Kind of like there's one really, really interesting little bit of Spirited Away where Chihiro ends up taking the train. Just the animation itself is beautiful, but she goes and she sits down and she has the little mouse and she has the little bird guy and she's got no face and they're all taking this adventure basically to grandma's house together. There are tons of people on that train, but they're all ephemeral, ghost-like. They're shadows in the bright. And for the most part, that's what the crowd is in a novel. That's what the crowd is meant to be. They are tonal things, so they can show us the tone, the setting, what kind of diversity do we have in a place. We want to make sure that we're not going monocultural unless that's the purpose of what we're doing. We also want to be respectful against appropriation because, some stories are not ours to tell. But for the most part in a novel, they are those brilliant little pops of shadow that help us see a painting full of light in a better way. And they're not meant to be the vase or the flowers or even a background person who gets really brightly colored. And if you're finding things are a bit confusing or things are a bit muddled, oftentimes you're trying to make too much of those artistic shadows that are just there to better reflect the mains. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, Daz, I think you can do ensemble, but that means if that's your ensemble, then you're limiting the amount you see of other things. You're not going to 7 different places to see 7 different people and how they connect. You're not going to be having these hugely intricate back and forths between the villain's point of view and the hero's point of views. And I think that's the important part. And it's very different than what I expect we're going to be talking about with TTRPG NPCs, because in a game, as an avid player of video games myself, all the information that's not coming out of the main character's direct experiences are when you walk up to the nearest T-posing character with a little highlight above its head and you click on it and it goes, "Oh no, Sally, where's my horse? Can you find my horse?" It kind of brings you into tangential parts of the story that way.
Yeah, that's just one of the many things that they do.
And in a novel, because we already know where the main characters are going and what they need to do, the writer is the one in control. They are the ones telling the person who's along for the ride. They're not changing based to the whims of what certain people might expect of them or want. And I think that's the major difference. It is that perspective of how you give information and what information you're willing to give. I think the last thing I'll really say about minor characters in novel right now is the character of Finnegan the Fae in the Judge of Mystic Saga, was originally just kind of a pass-through minor character. He was just kind of there momentarily for Caleb to get to his next place. He was just a mechanic of what I needed for Caleb to grow. And the first version of Son of Abel that made it onto the Macro Microcosm literary journal. It was serialized over about, I think, 5 sessions. It did not have Finnegan in it. It was just Caleb. It was just Caleb. And I mean, that was fine. It was a short story. That was a character study. And, it was what it was. But through discussing with my editor was like, oh my God, you have to write Finnegan. What's Finnegan doing? I'm like, what do you care about Finnegan for? This is about Caleb. She's like, no, what's Finnegan doing? Because I made the mistake of giving Finnegan an Irish accent when we were talking about him. And she was like, oh my God, Finnegan. And then I was like, you've got to be kidding. And so I wrote a couple of scenes with Finnegan that would kind of go concurrent to Caleb. And I gave it to my beta readers, and they were like, oh my God, more Finnegan, Team Finnegan, Finnegan. And it was like, no. I mean, I love Finnegan, but he did become quite the major force in Judge of Mystics because of the response from my editor and my beta readers. I get why they wanted that desire for balance, because especially the original Son of Abel, like we were on the 2nd edition now, it was quite dark. And once I understood what they wanted, that they couldn't have the constant pressure of Caleb being kicked in the dust, then it was like, okay, I get this now. I understand. That's where Finnegan came from. It was a way of balancing out the tone, the mood, and of explaining things that happened that were fairly serendipitous in the first version, but explaining how they came to be and explaining the world build for the subsequent versions. So that's one thing that a minor character can be. It can be a form of balance. And that's sometimes, that's going back to character. That's going back to the main character and to the tone of the entire project. You do need to make sure you have these balancing acts in there. Minor characters, they can be excellent ways of bringing in distinct personalities and diversity. Although I think that you have to tread lightly when it comes to the idea that, oh no, it's great, add some minor characters, but make sure they follow the following check marks of diversity. Well, okay, no, hold on. They deserve main character status. They deserve their own stories. They deserve their own novels, and they deserve an incredible amount of appreciation. Throwing them in as a castaway minor character just because then you can click a box, that, in my opinion, that's not the right approach. The right approach is to either partner with people that can help you write a manuscript that bring these people to fucking life, or recognize that maybe some things are not your story and that you should encourage the people whose story it is to get out there and start working, whether it's within your world or not. I think that when we get into minor characters being used as a sort of clicky boxy checklist kind of thing, in my opinion, I have very, very few times seen it where it doesn't feel fake. It irks me. Have a character because you've fallen in love with this character in your mind, not because you need to check a box.
I think if you have too many checklist items you're trying to hit, you're really only going to have time to skim the surface level of all those identities.
It has the same bland effect in your TTRPG. If you're just throwing something in there, oh, this is just going to reflect my world. There has to be a reason that character is there. They can't just be, oh, hey, I got to put this or that in. Your players aren't going to believe it for a minute.
Yeah, and in literature, every single character that you name has to have a purpose. Their purpose could be a more nihilistic one of nothing is purposeful. In that case, you're writing a certain kind of story. But every character needs to have a purpose. And in literature, we have to recognize, too, that, there's this huge kind of swing to going almost ultra realistic. Well, this is realism. There is a place for that kind of literature and that kind of story. I'm not saying there's not. As somebody who likes to escape through my literature, realism doesn't do it for me. The reason realism doesn't totally do it for me is while I want an authentic character, I want to feel Caleb's pain and then how he gets out of it. I want to feel Ares' anger as he realizes he's losing Midgard. I want to feel Demian's angst as he's staring at the docile machine that is Lieben, who is on the ground, and he realizes all he has to do is call one person. He could get her taken away and all of his financial problems would be over. He'd be free. But what does he do? He picks her up and takes care of her and makes sure she's safe. And obviously we find out what happens in Neon Lieben. If you haven't read it, please go do so. It is in paperback, hardcover, and digital, and I am working on the audiobooks. But E.M. Forster, the illustrious author of the Horatio Hornblower novels, said in aspects of the novel, In daily life, we never understand each other. Neither complete clairvoyance nor complete confessional exists. We know each other approximately by external signs, and these serve well enough as a basis for society and even intimacy. But people in a novel can be understood completely by the reader if the novelist wishes. Their inner as well as their outer life can be exposed. And this is why they often seem more definite than characters in history, or even our own friends. We have been told all about them that can be told. Even if they are imperfect or unreal, they do not contain any secrets, whereas our friends do and must, mutual secrecy being one of the conditions of life upon this globe. I think it's that essence there of true character in a piece of literature. You get to know their secrets. You get to see inside their mind. You get to live inside their emotions and their soul. You get to see their triumphs and their failures, not just from an outside perspective, but internally. That make the idea of minor characters a sort of minefield, because you want to see this character internally. You want to see their motivations, but you do not have time in a novel to go through them all. Which means you have to write more stories where you can reflect on one character at a time, or you can pick two and do that kind of thing and then keep them going throughout an entire world. And this is why we get series. We get world builds where you're going to be around these characters for years, so you better fucking love them. Or you better hate them enough that you want to see them get their comeuppance. And as creators, when we're looking at something like making worlds on World Anvil for TTRPGs, or like I'm doing for my novels, I have to love these worlds. I have to fall in love with the characters. I have to feel for these characters. They have to be living, breathing organisms inside my mind. Because otherwise, I'm going to end up breaking off that. And then, it's going to be years of having to work with things that I don't necessarily like anymore. Or you're going to abandon that project halfway through and you might get a novel out of it. And then you're moving on to the effort of making a completely different world, which is totally fine too. But when we as creators have to be in a place where we are really feeling for our characters and we're experiencing them in a very visceral, almost more personal way than we can experience our friends, it's difficult to kind of pick and choose. Well, I know you, Icarus. I see you in Charnash. You are not the main character of Charnash. You are there to show who Caleb is. You are there to show who Ares is. You are there to give Caleb the next thing he needs to complete the plot. And pulling back on that beloved character that you have in your mind, because being a minor character is to step back. It's to be the background musician. It's to be that shadow cast by the main figure in the painting or the main figure in the photograph. And if your main character is not reflecting hard on a change in the plot or a shift in the character, then I'm sorry, it does not belong. Remove it. It is dead weight. It is dross in the crucible and ought not to be put in at all. Watch this end up turning into Daz versus Sappha, the knockdown, drag out, minor characters need to be deleted versus NPCs are the only thing keeping me alive. It truly is. It's just the difference in the medium, man. Like, again, there's nothing good or bad for the different approaches. It's just a completely different medium. And I think more people, more creators need to understand that the mindset of being a novelist is a completely different mindset to a game master putting people through a TTRPG. It's such a different mindset, and there is a different mode of creation that needs to happen there. That's not that one is better than the other. They're all on a plateau. It's like a script writer has a different approach to things than, a novelist as well. Writing a novel is not nearly as collaborative of an art unless you're co-writing it with somebody. And so my rules of like, well, if this minor character doesn't have to do with this or that, then they're gone. That would make a piss poor game. I would need to learn much more to be able to enter into that GM space because I'm completely ignorant of it. And that's okay. That's why I'm here, to sit here and learn from this incredible resource that Daz is giving us with her decades of experience doing exactly this.
I'll present you a challenge, Safa. You've read a good chunk of Blackstone, and as I go through these, I want you to see if you can figure out what I might have stuffed in there that fits into this category. We need to know what an NPC is. It's a non-player character, which means nobody plays it except the game master in order to facilitate things. A proper definition is an NPC is a character the players of a tabletop role-playing game interact with during the game. These characters serve as the game master's mouthpiece in a variety of ways. First off, you have a flavor character. This is an NPC that serves as flavor to help the players feel like their characters truly are part of the world. This could be a bard singing a catchy tune who suddenly sings a verse about something the players have done, good or bad. They could even be a town guard, like you might have noticed this in Skyrim if you ever played. Someone stole your sweet roll. I mean, how many times have you had somebody say that to you as you're walking by? By the way, speaking of that, someone stole your sweet roll, I used that, a town guard. There was an incident in the street, and a town guard came by, and the players were making this protest, and when the guard came up to them, then he goes like, oh, someone just stole your sweet roll. And it just so pissed off the character. It was great. This became a more pertinent NPC than the flavor NPC they were just supposed to be. Oh, well, these flavor NPCs are supposed to be one-off characters, meaning they're only intended to interact once or twice, and that's it. They still always have a personal purpose to themselves that they're fixated on seeing through or trying to avoid. For instance, you're supposed to meet somebody and they're like, do hurry up, the 6th bell is about to ring and I can't be here, type thing, because they have something else they need to do that the characters may not even know about, but it gives them an attitude, and then they do what they're supposed to do and then leave. These NPCs also deliver clues that might have been missed by the party previously that are vital for them to continue. But no matter what you do, their presence must be plausible and their blurting forth whatever it is justifiable. Another thing with these characters is they're the ones that you really want to use a concept called convenient history. Now, for instance, this is like players need some guidance, and they come across a fisherman who goes, 10 years ago, I was a shotgunner for the Courier Express. I knew all the secret side gates into the city districts, but I took an arrow to the knee, so now I'm just a humble fisherman. So there's a reason that they bumped into this fisherman who could possibly give them clues they need to get into a different district of the city. It's just like you're trying to give them the tools they need to carry on the story if that's where they want to go. You're giving them options type thing. Now, the next type of NPC is the guide. This kind of NPC literally shows the party how to get from point A to point B. They could be an undead librarian who knows the books really well and shows the party things they never knew. Maybe they can find some obscure fact and they're blabbering it out or something when they're in there researching. Maybe they form a bond and the guy says, hey, well, cool, I'll help you with this. Maybe it's a sky captain with insight about traveling the skies, or a fortune teller with their own insight into the dangers up ahead, thus doing things for the PCs that they cannot do themselves. NPCs fill those gaps to help everything move smoothly. The guide character NPC often helps the party move forward. You really should take that left turn at Dawson's Creek unless you want to climb the Dagger Peaks. They're telling you, take a left. Create tension. You kind of want to build that up for the players because they want to be immersed in that feeling of, oh no. So, best be on your toes around here. Them squelch beetles are always hungry and never dine alone. That type of thing. Another thing they do is they speed up travel time. Player characters need to travel the world to get to other places. But that intermittent time from point A to point B, traveling time, almost all games have mechanics for like survival rolls and things you encounter on the way. That's well and good, but it can get tedious. So you can present them with an NPC who's like, skies permitting, it'll be 3 days of easy flying aboard my bodacious barge here, and you'll be setting foot in Filcher's Gully all refreshed. Yes, I'd want to be refreshed if I was going into Filcher's Gully. This sounds like a lovely place. And the next NPC type is the Advancer. This kind of NPC helps to drive the plot forward and puts the PCs back on track. They're kind of feeling lost in what they really need to do. This is the kind of character you need. And this is also the one that is also a quest giver. They can be used to collect clues the PCs might have missed, helps them interpret details, and provides a hint or even a solution. But this must come with a cost, like a hefty fee or a lost friendship. You only use these as needed to give out plot information and refocusing the characters back onto the plot. An example of this would be Gandalf yelling, "Run, you fools!" and then falling with the Balrog. Then they lost Gandalf in that. The next NPC is the Rival. This is a friendly character who pushes the PCs to be better. They give them that drive to work together. Boromir would be kind of this type of NPC. He pointed out flaws, he was a sounding board, and then helped the hobbits learn sword fighting, and then other things happened. But yeah, you see, it's more of a kind of like a rival in that. Then there's the Mentor PC. This PC is needed as a game master's metagame voice. This is the game master, like me, talking directly to my players, but staying in one of the thousands of voices that I have to have. These characters are to advise on how to do stuff, like maybe they need to have an encouragement to use some of their feats, skills, or abilities that they don't fully understood yet, so you're trying to encourage them to use them, to this is where this would be a good place. These characters also don't know the answers, but they provide insight, maybe a hint at a solution, but not actually giving it away. Perhaps they suggest ways to play the game better, or guide the party, the players, on how to work together. You're all trying to do different things, and then you can just drop in the mentor character that would go, "You lack cohesion. Only when the stones fall together do they become an avalanche." And this leads us to the next NPC type, and that is the support NPC. This character handles the menial tasks and takes care of the mundane needs that make life easier for the characters. The mentor is where you're trying to help the players immerse better into the world, play better, encouraging them that way. Whereas this character is to support and encourage the character itself that each player is playing. Things like sharpening weapons, repairing armor, doing the shopping, the technical things that you often have to do for your supplies. They're the type of people who want to help others. Their main purpose is to drive the pace of the game by removing the mundane tasks for the PCs. Maybe you got a camp guard so you can go into that dungeon and not worry about your stuff you left outside, like your mounts, maybe your boat, maybe you got a ship, and all of a sudden you got to leave it. Well, you don't really want to do that because somebody might take it while you're gone. This is that part, the support character. They also inform the PC that these tasks have been done. Well, shopping is done. You are good to go. The ship is in tip-top condition. We are all ready to sail wherever you want it. An example of this is Sam in Lord of the Rings. He had his own hopes and dreams. While being there to the end, he never overshadowed Frodo, but he made sure that Frodo could be the hero he needed to be. Now, this was supporting the character. I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you. That type of thing, that little thing, effort to get the hero to that place where they can then be the hero they are. That is the magic of the NPC, is you want that character to feel that bond, because there's a reason that character is there as a support character. And this is never a choice by the dungeon master, by the way, the game master. The players always choose who is with them, and you just have to roll with it. But then when you realize what this character is meaning to them, that is what you provide for them. Maybe it's the significant other, it's a love interest, it's something like that they're trying to explore with their character, that angle, and the support character is to help that player develop their character that way. That's the support in NPC. But at the same time, it can never overshadow the hero. They have their little tiny moments, but that's all they get. That's a main character as a whole, but this aspect of them, that's how I'm carving it out. And that's how, in TTRPGs, that's what you're looking at. This is what they're doing in this part. I'm not taking all of that. Just this moment, this is what they're doing, and you never take them beyond this level. I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. You can definitely have that moment in your own games for the PCs. Maybe that's how the player wants to develop their character. They want to develop a bond with an NPC, which the game master never chooses who these intents, with the exception of the advancement and maybe the mentor and a little bit of the flavor. The guide, you just provide them. The flavor is there. The flavor, the advancer, and the rival the flavor, the advancer, and the mentor are key components for the game master, and usually from those, all the other ones are chosen by the players to fill a need that they think they need for their characters. Okay, and another type is a comic reflection. These characters show what bad idea decisions are for what they are. They show them up so in a humorous way, and hopefully you reduce the players from carrying out bad ideas. Like, for instance, they'll have maybe they got this they hired somebody to come help them. Hey, we need an extra sword guy. We'll hire this cell sword to come help us in this dungeon. That should be fine, right? And they get there or do whatever, and it's like, and that character goes, let's split up the party. Nothing wrong ever comes from that, right? So he's trying to. So basically, you have the NPC shout out the most outrageous solution to what they see, because that would be the worst. In this particular case, you know that if the party splits up, you're going to kill them. You know, if they do something that dumb. So you try to hint at it in a way that, no, you don't want to split up. You want to do something else. So you do an overly, something like that. And they usually reflect to that.
NPCs are a great warning system for players.
Yes. Usually try to do it in a comic reflection kind of way. Or maybe they see a guy laying on the road, Pincushion Pete, and in his last breath he says, we tried to storm the castle through the front gates. Oh, if it wasn't for this arrow in my knee. Plop. But that all leads to the most complicated of them all, the long-term NPC. They can be from any of these. These are any of these NPCs that you present, and basically every NPC you present to the party is only there to meet with them once or twice, here and there, and that's it. They're gone forever. And it is the players every single time who chooses who's going to be the long-term NPC. There are some rare exceptions, like I said, the advisor, the mentor, but it is up to the players who decide who's truly going to be that long-term with the party. And these long-term characters always come from any of the other types, anywhere from even a bit NPC flavor character that came just there to be that snarky guard to show the attitude of the town guards. And then you have to come up with a reason. Maybe they like the PCs, or now that the PCs like them, and they're like, oh, okay. And then now the game master has to make them into something more. Now you have to think of a complex background, and you have to provide solid emotional responses to the characters, whether he's snippy, snarky, friendly, always glaring at them with suspicion, whatever. And then just have to bounce that off the players, because that's apparently what they like about them. You have to really be able to flex a lot. This is like improv in the most awkward of moments, almost always happens. So every time you do an NPC, you have to give them a name. Trust me, if you just have, a courier runs up and gives you a letter and then dashes off, oh no, that never works. That courier has to have a name, because your players are just going to sit there and harp on you until they get a name up for this character. Of course, when they show up, they have to be, what species are they? Because especially if you're in a fantasy setting, not everybody is human. Do they have a gender, obvious or hidden, and what they look like? These are all the basic things because you're usually describing them off the times because you're making this character up off the cuff. Take notes. Trust me, take notes because 5 seconds after the scene ends, you're going to forget about it. Your players never, ever will. Also, you need to make note of what do they do? Is they emergent? Is this a thief pretending to be a servant? What is this NPC's personal goal or purpose in that moment that they met? And are they fixated on seeing to it or avoiding it? Another thing you have to keep in mind is their attitude, whether they're friendly, indifferent, or suspicious at the start. And then finally, what is at stake for this NPC if they fail their personal goal or purpose? And if they fail, will they blame the PCs? That's another thing you want to do because now that they've run into somebody and they gave that somebody a bad day for whatever, they don't even know what they did wrong. They kept that person and now they failed in their personal goal and now they're feeling a bit peaked about it. And that's somebody that you can then think to bring back to now maybe be an enemy or something if you need it. It's a good thing that when the players interact with somebody and it's a bad interaction, usually save it on the side because now you can put them into your minions for the bad guys pile. The immersion of that with your players is phenomenal. Your players made your planet. That's all it is. And they don't even know it.
You can read more about writing NPCs for TTRPGs over on our blog at vraedamedia.ca. That is VRAEYDAMEDIA.ca/WADY. And if you're interested in learning even more about writing TTRPG content, then you're in luck. Join us in our next episode as we begin our TTRPG one-shot series.
And with that, all you rebels, writers, and gamers, we're wrapping up another mind-bending episode of We Aren't Dead Yet, your go-to for all things TTRPG and speclit. Stay wild, curious, and keep defying the ordinary. Until next time, hit up WADY at vraedamedia.ca/WADY. That's VRAEYDAMEDIA.ca/WADY. Like and subscribe, share with your friends, check out our merch store. We'll see you next week for more news, views, and hullabaloos. So keep the fires burning, the dice rolling, and the pages turning. And remember, there's always something we can do, 'cause we aren't dead yet.